everyone. The theme for today's discussion is environmental laws. And today with us, we have Professor Ruchira Chaturvedi from Dharamshala National Law University. Ma'am has been an academician for over a period of 3 years and has practiced litigation for 2 years as well. Ma'am pursued her LLM from National Law University Bhopal in administrative law and constitutional law. Ma'am specializes in administrative law, constitutional law, and environmental law. Ma'am, it indeed is an honor to have you here with us and an absolute privilege to have this enlightening conversation with you.
Question. I find the principle of sustainable development as the most important and the basic principle of environmental law. The reason one can find the roots of this principle in the Constitution itself in Article 48A, and all the legislations that emerge, they are all subjected to the Constitution of India, and the provisions are validated on the basis of their consonance with the provisions of the Constitution. So there lies the legal basis. Apart from that, I would also say that sustainable development is important, also because this is a principle that we as Indians have known from our old times. This is the principle that has been in existence from the very old times, and we have been carrying it in our mindsets through our forefathers. So when the modern legal system came into existence, we borrowed various principles and ideas from several jurisdictions, but whatever we adopted, all of those principles, we have molded it to fit into the mindsets that we carry, and accordingly we have implemented it in our legal system. So when we talk about the legislations that reflect the principle, those legislations have been formulated by the legislators who are carrying the same mindset as every other Indian, and that mindset of sustainable development and sabka saath sabka vikas, as Modi ji says these days, this mindset is not new to India, and we have been carrying it from the olden times. Many civilizations came and went, but this one thing or one idea of sustainable development and developing along with the nature, this has been there and it is still there. I will give you an example for that. You in India, in most of the households, I would say more than 80% of the households use bucket and mug for bathing purposes. That is very normal, very usual for India. They may have shower system in their places, but they are most comfortable with the bucket and mug system of bathing. And world knows it today that this is a system that is most feasible system for saving water, that avoids the wastage of water most efficiently. So we have it inbuilt in our lifestyle. The idea of sustainable development is inbuilt in our lifestyle, and even if we want it, we cannot let go of it. So that is one idea. Another example I'd give you, whenever in Indian households, when the homemakers, when they chop vegetables, when they peel off vegetables, the vegetable peels are not, mostly they are not thrown out, rather they are put out for the cows and other animals to eat, and they readily come and eat. And it is a normal trend that our homemakers put out grains for the birds. It can be seen almost in every 3 of the 4 households. If you go around, roam around in India, this is a normal trend. So by this example, what I am trying to convey is that Indians have it inbuilt in their systems, the idea of sustainable development. So when we try to look the same in the legislations, we will find it readily. Not just that, I personally, after going through the environmental laws, I personally feel that sustainable development is not just a principle but a goal that environmental law seek to achieve. So all the principles other than this emerge from this very principle of sustainable development. So ultimately, the root and the goal both will always be the idea of sustainable development. That is why this idea finds the most relevant place in the environmental laws. India today is ranked third, right after China and USA, in power generation. And all this has been possible because of the positive policies that have been put in place in the past 2 years. And if we look back and if we track the changes and the evolution in the past 2 years in the energy sector, then we would see that there have been drastic changes that have been observed in the energy sector in India, and that happened comfortably mainly because there has been an increase, there has been positive policies put in place, and one of the relevant policies that needs mention here is the implementation of 100% FDI in the renewable energy sector, be it generation, be it distribution of the electricity. So this 100% FDI policy has led to immense growth of the renewable energy sector. And in today's date, the conventional energy source of India, along with the ambitious projects and the targets of Government of India, hold a total share of approximately 63.2%, whereas that of renewable energy sources is 34.6%. But with these positive policies, favorable policies in place, this renewable sector is set to increase. And if, without going into the numbers, if predicted comfortably on the basis of the data that is available and looking at the policies that are in place, it can be said comfortably that in the coming years this renewable source of energy is set to increase, and it may in fact overtake the conventional energy sources share as well. This is a positive change, and this is something that can be said to be moving in direction of sustainable growth of the energy sector. And apart from this, there has also been a certain amendment introduced into the guidelines relating to tariff and all, which have been the amendments proposed are more consumer centric, and it will be, if put in place, then these amendments are certain to favor the consumers and make these energy laws more sustainable and more favorable to the consumers, the end line consumers. There I can recall of two cases, the Gujarat Urja Vikas Nigam case, and it was the Adani one, and there is Energy Watchdog case. Taking both these cases into consideration at one time, one can say that these have introduced significant changes into the rehabilitation and restructuring of the energy infrastructure. So by this we can comfortably say that the energy legislations are moving in a direction of being sustainable completely. We have the energy laws which are more focused on sustainable growth, but with the growth of renewable energy sources, these legislations are further to move into the direction of the sustainability. But one point that is of concern for everyone and for me as well, is the growth of nuclear sources as energy sources. Uh, See, in today's date, we nuclear source of energy is a sustainable source, and it is set to become a renewable source if we are successfully able to extract uranium, which is the source of nuclear energy, from the seawater. Currently, we are extracting it from mineral ore. So, if we are successful in extracting the same from seawater, then this nuclear energy source would become a renewable energy source. But though nuclear energy is one of the most powerful sustainable energy source, but the risk that it entails along with it is much higher and much intense when we look at other renewable energy sources, and this makes it a riskier job to look for. So instead, I am more in favor of focusing on the safer renewable sources instead of the nuclear energy sources, because unless the government is successful in putting the safeguards in place, and those safeguards should be foolproof. So unless the government is able to put in place the foolproof safeguards against the accidents that may occur or the misuse of this power, unless that is done, resorting to nuclear sources of energy would be a risky business. Instead, just as we are looking at the drastic growth of these renewable energy sources, if this growth sustains itself and successfully the prediction comes to fruition and we see the renewable sources share uh, increasing more than the conventional sources, then we can safely focus more on these renewable sources and lesser on the riskier renewable sources like the nuclear one. So reliance on the nuclear uh, power as an energy source should be lesser, and more reliance should be put on the safer renewable sources. My views on Supreme Court. See, as an academician, I engage in discussions, but I do not really find it very encouraging, or I don't feel very enthusiastic in criticizing any organ of the government for that matter. And so I will not indulge into case to case analysis as to how the work should have been done and what has not been done, because ultimately the authority doing the job knows best how to do the job and what are the limitations, what have been the instant limitations with the cases. So I will not be indulging into that. But as a general comment, my observation till date has been, even after coming into place of NGT, Supreme Court seems to have been overburdened, and many cases at times have been restricted or have been held up at several stages. Some are held up at the stage of admission, while several are held up at the stage where they have gone through the preliminary hearing stage and the next hearing is pending. And many are have crossed the stage where they have completed the hearing procedure, but the judgment part is pending. So, on these accounts, I find the Supreme Court lacking, and but many a times I have also seen that even if the Supreme Court does its job well and on time, the government fails it. For example, in 2011, Supreme Court asked the government, central government, to set up an independent environment regulator. Up till now, I mean up till May 2020, and even now, such an independent environment regulator has not been set by the central government. So, not that the government did not get time or did not get the opportunity, but there has been some lack on the part of government as well. So where one one instance the Supreme Court lacks, on the other instance it is failed by the government in place. So in general, in one sentence, if I have to say this, I may say that often Supreme Court has been lackadaisical in its approach to environmental matters and as an environmental regulator. On other instances, it has been failed by the government too. So overall, the Supreme Court has not been very efficient in serving as an environmental regulator, and not that it has not done its job, but that it is often delayed, and we know justice delayed is justice denied. Some kind sort of that is the issue here as well. So it would be better if certain functionaries or certain limbs of the Supreme Court are put in place to handle these issues separately if the Supreme Court is overburdened with the general issues to be dealt with. And I really fail to understand with NGT at place, how is it that we still have so many cases pending and the Supreme Court is not able to fulfill its job as an environmental regulator. AI has recently emerged as one of the finest solutions to the climate issues or the environmental issues, and somehow the debate has, in its favor, has been rightly so. Certain environmental issues, like the issues relating to climate, the ones relating to biodiversity and conservation, or those relating to weather and resilience, and air and water pollution. These are certain issues that need urgent and immediate redressal. And AI can be very helpful in playing a proactive role in curtailing or preventing the same, and at times where the pollution or the issues has already occurred, then in such a situation then AI can serve as a solution machinery to better address the issues. So the best aspect in this regard for AI is that the knowledge that the machine acquires through machine learning is something that can be shared. I mean by saying this that a machine, when learns from scratch to a certain point, the same knowledge can be transferred to another machine, and the next machine would not be learning from the scratch, rather from the point where the first machine has left. So this knowledge, the machine learning and the intelligence that the machine acquires through this learning is ever growing, and it can be shared with multiple entities at once, and it can be utilized at multiple points at once. So in this regard, the cost effectiveness of this solution machinery is much better than any other solution machinery. As far as the criticism of AI goes, the artificial intelligence training of one machine for artificial intelligence emits around 284 million tons of carbon, which is equal to the 5 times of lifetime emission of an average car, carbon emission of an average car. And looking at that, it seems that training an AI may not be very much effective for the environment. Rather, it may end up harming the environment in the long run. But if we look at the overall picture, the larger picture of the same, then we would find that the learning that is transferred from one machine to the another and the ever growing intelligence that is associated with this idea of machine learning makes it a cost effective solution, as I said earlier as well. So this one time cost can be taken care of by the intelligence that the machine acquires and the solution that the machine suggests for the same. And this field is growing drastically over time. It is growing tremendously. And if we talk about India, Many establishments are investing into this new field, and they are embracing the potential of AI as a potential solution for resolving the environmental issues. There has been a program launched by Microsoft in association with other bodies, and this program gives the funds to the researchers who intend to research in finding AI as a solution to various environmental issues. There are many celebrities associated with the cause, like one of the very famous celebrity Hollywood actor Leonardo DiCaprio is associated with it. Recently, we have seen the girl Greta Thunberg made news on this cause. So if we see, there is awareness on the cause of environment, but we need more awareness on AI as a solution for addressing the environmental issues. However, the grants that has been given under the AI for Earth program in India, there have been many contenders. I think have been more than 16 contenders from India, and that makes India as a fertile ground for this program, that is AI for Earth. So the idea of AI as a solution machinery for the environmental issues is growing, and more people are looking into the idea and as a resolution machinery. And hopefully, if the idea goes into a positive direction, then we may soon have various kind of resolution machineries uh, backed up by AI to address the environmental issues in India as well. Environmental issues cannot be, or the environmental laws cannot be restricted in their study to the broader and bigger issues of environment. Rather, if we look closely, then the environmental issues that we look into emerge from the grassroots level. And at it from this perspective, the role of local self-governments become very crucial and important in addressing the environmental issues. Not only this, talking from the academics perspective, often in the curriculum we see that the students are taught the national legislations, the international laws relating to environment, but there is no focus or no admiration of the powers and functions of these regional bodies or the local governments, which is important. So from this perspective, if we talk about the scope of environmental law or the environment is way broader than what we perceive today. So, keeping that in mind, it is essential that we loosen our focus, we increase our boundary of focus to other perspectives as well, and not restrict ourselves to national and international laws only. From a practitioner's point of view, if we look at the issues and if we look at the environmental law regime, there are very few environmental law practitioners well known for their substantial work done. Few enough to be countable in number, in fingers. So the reason behind that is there is a very limited understanding of the environmental law, and since the base of this understanding lies at the college level or the graduate level, it is essential that the curriculum is more focused on giving a holistic understanding of environmental laws rather than restricting the study to national and international law regime only. It also has been my personal observation that out of a class of 100, usually only 2 students come up who are really interested in the deeper study and analysis of the environmental laws, and the others are least interested in even looking at their textbooks for the second time. So, this is an issue, but this issue is mainly with the curriculum. The curriculum today is way too restricted, and this restricts the viewpoint of the scholars as well. And if at the base level, if the interest is not generated, then it is highly unlikely that the person will gather interest later in life when the person is already overburdened with the struggles of life. So if in general, if I look at the scope of environmental law, it is way beyond what is being perceived today. And if we look at it from the academics perspective, then the scope has been unnecessarily restricted to a very myopic uh, angle, and very myopic view has been given to it, which needs to be looked at and well thought again, so as to have a better impact of the scholarly uh, intellect of the people on the growth of environmental laws.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for taking time out from your busy schedule and having this eye opening conversation with us. It indeed was a pleasure.